governor's going to be
polls open at 7 and close at 8, right?
Yes.
We'll get things underway here at 7 o'clock. I'm Jeff Gordon. I'll be moderating candidates night tonight. Orono municipal elections are going to be held on March 13th. Everybody in town will be voting here in the council chambers. The polls open at 7 o'clock in the morning and close at 8 p.m. in the evening. Tonight we'll be hearing from two school board candidates. There are 2 open seats on the school board. The candidates are Mark Brewer and Brian McGill, both incumbents. And for the council, we have 3 seats open and 6 candidates. The candidates are Maya Dendiger, Ruben Dendiger, Sam Kuntz, Daniel LaPointe, Tom Perry, and Cheryl Robertson. We'll be doing a question and answer session for 45 minutes for these 2 school board candidates. And then as soon as they're finished or we've exhausted the questions over the 45 minutes, we'll move on to the council candidates. With 6 candidates for council, it's going to be difficult to get a whole lot of questions answered. We'll allow each candidate a 2-minute opening statement. And then we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. The candidates will have 1 minute to answer a question. The candidates have chosen numbers to determine the order in which they're going to answer the questions. Every candidate will have an opportunity to answer each question, and they will also have an opportunity to be the first one to answer a question. So. We ask that members from the audience who wish to ask questions that they come up to the microphone, present your name, and then ask your question. We ask that you keep your questions short and concise to make the best use of our time here tonight. We encourage you to not present your opinions, but do ask a question. Try to keep the questions short. So, we also ask that from the audience that we don't have any expressions of approval or disapproval of any question or any answer, and hold any applause until the session is finished. So you'll only have 1 chance to applaud, hopefully. So, with that, why don't we have Mark and Brian take the dais. And so for your opening statements, go ahead, Brian will be first. Brian?
Good evening. My name is Brian McGill. I'm running for one of the positions on Board of Directors of RSU 26, the Orono Schools. I've lived in Orono for about 8 years, and I have 2 kids in the schools. I have a 17-year-old son who's in the high school, who started at ASA and went through the middle school, and I have a younger son who's started in kindergarten at ASA and is in the middle school right now. So I've seen quite a bit of the schools. Also gotten to do some Orono Rec coaching with a lot of the kids in the schools as well. I'm currently a professor, an educator, and a researcher at the University of Maine in the School of Biology and Ecology. And Prior to that, I was a business consultant. I worked in a business consulting firm working with Fortune 100 companies looking at strategic IT decisions. And I would say that's one of my themes, kind of the two passions, and this actually runs through my whole family. You could go out 2 or 3 branches on the family tree. Everybody's either an educator or a business person. So the school board is a very logical place to take those 2 skill sets and bring those together. For my own career, and those are my passions, is helping organizations be effective and successful and fiscally effective, and educating the future of our kids. Obviously, schools are pivotal to any community. I think more so perhaps in Maine than in some of the other states or big cities. Each community, in terms of people moving in and out, a lot of that depends on the schools. The schools play a central role in other ways, the sports teams, the community meeting place. So I really think a strong school is a central feature of the town of Orono. Personally, it's why I moved to Orono, was the schools here in Orono and the staff and the experience we had when we visited the schools. And so I think that's important to keep going for the town of Orono. So I have been on the board. Sorry, I just noticing the time. You've got 2 hours going instead of 2 minutes, but I thought I had a lot more time than I did for a second there.
We just like to hear you talk, Brian.
Yeah. So I've been serving on the board for 3 years. This would be a second term that I'm running for. I've served as the chair of the board for the last 2 years of the board. So I think, in short, if you like where the schools are headed, I would suggest you should vote for me, and if you don't like where the schools are headed, I would suggest you should probably not vote for me. When I ran 3 years ago, my top priority was to, how much time do I really have?
You're out of time.
I'm out of time, okay. All right.
I apologize for that. That's
I'll stop there. Thank you.
Mark.
Can we just have a moment to reset
Yeah.
our technical difficulties?
There we go. No, still doing it.
I need to bring it closer. I apologize.
Oh, you're not seeing it.
No. How do I save it? It didn't save it though. Save. Okay.
All right.
All right. We are down to 2 minutes.
All right. Go, Mark.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Mark Brewer. I am a resident of Orono and have been since 2009. Live here with my wife, Tammy, my 4 children, all of whom go to Orono schools, and those are the only schools that they've gone to. Our oldest is an 8th grader. Our youngest are a set of 2nd graders. So I've been involved as a parent, a volunteer in the Orono schools since 2009, and I too am running for re-election. I was elected to a term previous to this and was first brought on the board to fill the remainder of an unexpired term that someone had resigned by the town council. I too am a professor at the University of Maine. I teach in the Department of Political Science. I would like your vote for the Orono School Board first, foremost, and above all else, because I think that the schools are the most important institution that any community has within its boundaries. And there's a lot of important institutions, and this is not to take away from the significance of any of the other ones, but the schools are where we prepare and nurture future residents of our community, citizens of our state, and also future citizens of our nation. As someone who studies politics and government, that is an important matter for me. I think beyond the services they provide for children, I think schools are in many ways the hub of the community. And so having healthy schools while at the same time making sure to be fiscally responsible. We have a finite amount of resources, and we are charged as public officials with using them responsibly and wisely, and those are the reasons why I seek another term on the RSU 26 Board of Directors. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we're ready to entertain questions from the audience. Anybody want to be first?
Nancy Rampy, 21 Edgewood Drive. Brian, you started to say what your priorities were, and then your 2 hours were up. So, question to both of you.
Yeah, so one of my goals for the last term has been to really focus on transparency and collaboration and community involvement in schools. And so that's something I put a lot of energy in. That's something I would like to continue. I think there's been much more outreach, and I think that's critical for any democratic institution, especially small town Maine. But also, in addition to that, I've been pushing more STEM, which I think is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics at the high school, which I think has started to happen. One of the things I would like to see that happen more is more interaction between our schools and the university. We have an incredible opportunity with that proximity, whether it's students going over to the university or professors coming down. I also like to see more involvement of the community at a volunteer level in the schools. I think that's something we could do more strongly going forward. And I think there's a lot of fiscal challenges. I'm sure we'll talk about that sometime tonight.
One of the things that's been a priority for me since coming to the board has been the need for greater coordination across our schools. In particular, vertical alignment. We've got 3 schools that are, 2 of which are attached to each other, one of which is just down the hill, so they're all closely together, but oftentimes we're treated as 3 separate institutions, and I thought that was probably not a good idea. And along with my colleagues on the board and current crop of RSU 26 administrators and teachers, we've been working to kind of knock down some of those barriers and bring greater coordination and alignment, and I think we've made a lot of progress towards that. Going forward, I certainly think our current focus on facilities, our facilities are aging, the infrastructure needs some attention for sure, and we're starting to focus on that. I'd like to be able to continue with that. And certainly, fiscal situation, while not as dire as it is in many communities, the state is not doing us any favors there, and I think we need to continue to focus on that. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I hope. Come on.
Lisa Feldman, Pond Street. The Orono schools have a great reputation for doing really well by children. You know, mom and dad both have graduate's degrees, and the kids are taking a boatload of AP classes and are going to go to selective colleges and universities, and doing somewhat less well for children who don't quite fit that profile. So what do you plan to do to support and encourage kids who don't fit that, you know, faculty brat profile?
Yeah, Mark, you should go first. Sorry.
Thank you. While that reputation may be out there, I would push back and challenge on that a little bit, especially in the years that I've been on the board. A lot of the data that we have seen show that RSU teachers and administrators have set in place programs and approaches that serve various groups of students quite well. That being said, that reputation is out there. One of the goals that we have set as a board is trying to foster an environment where we take each student where they are, and by the time they leave here, get them to reach their utmost potential. And we've, kind of laid that mindset in place, and teachers and administrators and support staff are fully supportive of that. There's all kinds of very exciting innovation, professional development going on by the staff in our schools, and that's one of the primary foci, is trying to make sure that they meet the needs of all the students. So we are trying very hard on that.
Brian?
Yeah, I would second what Mark said, that there's been a lot of investment in terms of time and also in terms of resources in the last 5 years in that area. And I think if you look, for example, at the test scores, it would show that that population is being served in a drastically stronger way than they have in the past, or at least in the recent past. There was a reading recovery specialist who was put into the elementary school, and that has had a phenomenal effect, both working one-on-one with the students, but also working with the teachers in reading recovery. A lot of studies out there show that those by about third grade, it doesn't matter if you learn to read in kindergarten or third grade, but you really have to get your skill under your belt by third grade, or else you start to not keep up in the rest of your classes. And so that's a critical age, and there's been a lot of effort there. They're about to do the same thing with math, so have a math recovery and instruction specialist. I think at the high school, it's a lot about the variety of courses, and not just having AP courses, but having lots of different kinds of courses. And I was just at the curriculum committee meeting. There's 6 new courses, and many of them are targeted at that population as well.
Okay, could we have the next question, please?
Paul Smith. Just a follow-up to that lady's question in terms of not the educationally challenged student, but we read a lot about the need to be producing students who are not college bound, but are going to work on I forget what the buzz phrase is these days, but what is your view on helping students, encouraging students, reaching out to students who may be seeking that track as opposed to the college education track? And in particular, we have UTC programs and that. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, as Mark mentioned, we went through visioning. Well, it was specifically a values process. We'd done visioning several years before that, but really trying to identify the core values of the district. And we came up through lots of workshops with teachers and community and parents and students. 3 core values, and meeting the student where they're at and moving them forward was one of them. Whole person, treating the whole person was one. And creating a growth mindset, or getting students comfortable with being challenged, was the third. But that first one I think we take very seriously. You mentioned UTC. You're right, there's lots of tracks, and there's lots of different valid tracks. I think UTC is an important one. I also think there's a lot of technical skills. So for example, I mentioned they were adding courses. One of the courses they just added is anatomy. And that there was already an AP anatomy course, but this is a non-AP anatomy course, and that directly targets the health professions, which is the fastest growing profession out there, some of which requires a bachelor's degree, but some of which doesn't require a bachelor's degree. Same with computers. So those are examples of things that are being done.
I would agree with what Brian just put out there. I would certainly point, I'm glad you brought up UTC. It's a fabulous program. At our last board meeting, our superintendent and our board rep to the UTC board spent a fair amount of time, updating us on all the great programs there. It's a model for the state. We send a fair amount of kids there, and I'm fully supportive of that program. I think it's fabulous. In terms of what we're doing at our schools themselves, I think we're certainly seeing at the high school a dramatic increase in the number of kind of engineering and computer science type courses, which certainly students who are going on a college-bound track can take, but there are other students who aren't, can also take them and develop skills that at least employers say will allow them to enter the workforce more smoothly. And there's been a big explosion in the number of those kind of offerings at the high school. There's more. I too am on the curriculum committee. There's going to be at least 2 more that are going to start in the fall. And our new librarian at the high school and the middle school has brought in some really exciting technology offerings that the students are just eating up. So we're working on that.
Okay. There's another question? Maya, did you have?
Hi, Maya Denninger. I'd like to know what your stance is on exclusionary disciplinary practices. So when students misbehave, responding to that by excluding from the classroom in some way through in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, and if there's a policy that you'd want to work toward implementing in the school district.
Certainly, we do have policies addressing that on the books, and we are just finishing up what is, I'm not even sure how long it's been, a almost 3-year process of going through and thoroughly revising and updating our policy, policy manual across the board. You never want to make kind of a universal one-size-fits-all statement, but I think it's safe to say that these exclusionary practices are not the norm in Orono. In fact, they are often used as a last resort. Orono generally as a policy and you know, as a tradition, a mindset has tried to stay away from those and really see those as not conducive to meeting the needs of the student. It's not the way that we like to go. Again, it's not to say that they're never put in use, because again, one size doesn't fit all, but they're almost always the last resort, and I'm supportive of that for sure.
Yeah, so I would echo what Mark said. I mean, there's both laws and policies on the books about that. I think the general mindset in Orono is that they are last resorts, that, I mean, you have to address each situation individually, and there are circumstances where that can be appropriate, but they're pretty last resort type of approach. I think probably it's also not that all situations go in this direction, but to the extent behavioral challenges and get involved in that, we have a very strong special ed program, and there's a lot of very strong teachers in that area who are very helpful in learning how to rechannel long before things get to that kind of level. So it is something to treat as a last resort. Personally, you know, if you were to ask me the very long vision, I think the restorative justice approach has had a lot of success in other parts of the country. And it's something I would like to see coming into the schools in Maine, generally in Orono.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hi there, Sam Coons, Mainwood Avenue. We mentioned a lot about STEM programming and technology, engineering, mathematics, that sort of thing, science. Very important, obviously, but there's also a movement in many schools for STEAM, including the arts in that. And the role of humanities and the arts definitely are valuable in methods of increasing critical thinking and soft skills that are just as important to develop thinkers. So it's not just a matter of a fun kind of class. What are your views on increasing arts programming, and also perhaps facilities that could support some of the arts programs that, I mean, I know we have an excellent arts program there, but I know the facilities in that area are rather lacking. So I'd like your thoughts on that.
So I mentioned we had the 3 values, and the whole student was definitely one of the pieces of those 3 values. I think the arts have always been a tip-top priority in Orono, whether it be for performing arts. We've had a fantastic English department. I'm noticing we have an English teacher sitting here. We've always had a very strong English program in Orono. So I mean, whether you want to lump it all together under STEAM or STEM, or I really think one of the things that's valued in Orono is the diversity, and we're not just a technology school or an arts school, or the opportunity students in our district have, curricular as well as extracurricular, are just exceptionally diverse, and I think that's a key thing to maintain going forward. You mentioned art facilities specifically. We're going through a process right now of putting together a long-term capital plan, and I guarantee you it's already come up. The art facility is going to be part of that discussion. Then it becomes a cost, can we afford it, kind of trade-off.
I would, again, not to sound like a broken record, but echo a lot of what Brian's saying. We have recently made decisions as a board to increase funding for arts programs. We added a position last year in, at least partial of a position for music. We've been investigating and have done some and are thinking about doing more in increasing arts offerings, art at the middle school. Orono students tend to want to do everything, whether it's high achievement in terms of academics, athletics, and the arts as well. And we want to make sure that they have the best opportunities to take advantage of whatever they're interested in. Performing arts space in particular is obviously, as you alluded to, a very pressing need, seen that way by many in the Orono community. I can virtually guarantee it will be at the top of the list of things to be discussed in this facilities process. I'll use my last 3 seconds to put a plug in for our upcoming public forum, February 28th, 6 p.m. with a 5 p.m. supper at the high school. I urge everybody to come and have their voices heard, so thank you.
Okay, next question.
Haven't changed my name since last time I was up here. We read a lot about regionalization across the state in schools, and especially seeking efficiencies in the administrative operations. And be really interested to hear, as school board members or wishing to continue, your thoughts on opportunities for the RNO schools to seek efficiencies through regionalization initiatives.
That's a great question. It's one that's been on the table in Maine for as long as I've lived here. I'm originally from New York State, and regionalization came to be a reality there far earlier than it did here. That being said, in order to be frank, I'll state that generally I'm opposed to regionalization efforts. I'm a very strong proponent of local control, and I would like to maintain that. That being said, I think that it would be foolish not to investigate possibilities that arise for collaboration and cooperation with neighboring communities, especially where they could improve services at a reduced cost. And so I'm certainly willing to investigate all the opportunities that come before us. There's some state funding that's being made available to investigate these right now, and we're certainly looking at that. But it would have to work for Orono in order for me to support it. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a politically hot topic right now, and quite frankly, I think it's being approached politically. Orono has always been part of regionalizations where it makes sense and where there's cost efficiencies. UTC, the technology program has already been mentioned. Spruce is another one for certain areas of special education. We are sharing a sports team with Old Town. There's all kinds of places where it can make sense to share costs. But what I find kind of odd is the assumption that nobody's been taking advantage of these opportunities already, and that somehow the districts need to be nudged in a direction towards more. As far as I'm concerned, Orono is about right-sized. I'm not saying that there's no opportunities left on the table, and I'd like to look for them and take them. But we're already doing a lot of things that are efficient, and I think a lot of other things are going to end up being a loss of local control, and quite frankly, I think are going to cost more money. That's what happened with the RSUs, and I think that's what's going to happen with the regionalization program.
Okay, next question. Cindy.
Hello, Cindy Maynard. You had mentioned the facilities forum. I'm wondering what you hope to see as some goals out of that, and what is your long-term vision as to how things would be paid for if you changed facility?
Guess I'm first on that one. So right now we're in a information gathering. I would call it a brainstorming phase. We're working with an architecture firm. They've come in and they've talked to the teachers and the staff and the principals. They've talked to the board. We put together a community-based facilities committee, and kind of reaching out to the larger community is the last step of that. And then the next step is to really capture that into the key principles, the key things that are coming up over and over again, start to put price tags on those, and then start to get real about what we can actually afford to do. There are several possible sources of funding. There is a state new schools program. We're going to look into that. We've done everything so far to tick the boxes, but I'm not holding my breath on that, to be honest. There is, however, a state renovation fund, which I think is a realistic area for some things about structural parts of buildings, American Disabilities Act, and so forth, and some of it may be local. And that's really why we're going through a very careful community process to assess what the community wants and what the community does or doesn't want to pay for.
Mark?
I would agree. Right now we're at an information gathering part of this operation. It's early on, and the public has had opportunities to hear little bits and pieces. This is their opportunity to hear more, but really their opportunity to make their voices heard to the firm that we're working with, to the larger facilities committee, and to the board and administration about what their priorities are. Because the reality is, we're going to have a much bigger list of wants and needs, and there will be some wants and some needs than we can possibly fund. So we want to figure out what the most important from people in the community wants are, what needs we have to do, because there are some things that we absolutely have to do, whether they're a high want or not. And then once we get that list put together, have serious conversations about how to fund those. I mean, I think, I'll be even more pessimistic than Brian. I think we've got very little to no chance of getting new school funding from the state. So we're really looking at the revolving renovation fund, or we're looking at local coverage, which most likely will include a bond. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Hi, Cecile Ferguson. Could you tell us about I'm not even sure there is one, the international program at Orono High School, and how you were maybe attracting foreign students who would be tuition-paying students, and how that would affect the budget or the school in a more general manner? Thank you.
It's a great question. It's something that as we get into the depths of budget season, which we're in right now, it's a tuition-paying students at the high school are something that we look very carefully at. We do have a pretty vigorous international student program. We've got a director of international programs, and she devotes a huge amount of time and energy and effort into identifying potential sources of international students, recruiting them, and then once they come, making sure that they have a positive, successful experience here. We have to be careful that we right-size that program, which in the last few years has been somewhere, at least the goal is in the 10 to 15 student range. Obviously, the higher students, the more tuition dollars we bring in. The carrying capacity is not infinite, and we want to make sure that we have it at the right size, and I think we do. That being said, if tuition-paying students from sending towns go down, we could possibly look to increase that. But we do have that program in place, and it's working well, in my opinion.
Okay.
Waiting for.
Go.
So go ahead and go. Okay. So yeah, we do have the program at the high school. It's been there 7 years, I think, maybe. And I would consider it a strong success. Financially, it's a success. It more than pays for the extra staff and things that are required to facilitate it, but also emphasize that I think it's a success on other levels. In particular, I think it brings a nice aspect of cultural diversity and international exposure to our high school students. And I think it's a great experience for the international students that come, many of whom actually end up going to the University of Maine or another university here in the U.S. So I think it's had a lot of success. I don't think, I think it's good to think about it as a source of money. I don't think it's going to fundamentally change our budget. I don't think it's the kind of thing where we would want to bring in 50 or 100 students. I don't frankly think we could, because every other town in Maine is recruiting as well. But even if we could, I don't think we would want to. I think it's a nice addition to the community that pays for itself.
Okay.
Lori Osher, Mayo Street. I'm looking at you, and there's Chief Orono right there below you, and Brian. So we're in a town that's named after a Penobscot chief, and I think it's within 20 years ago that the state mandated that there'd be Wabanaki education or studies and curriculum as part of the curriculum, and there was a lot of movement on that when it first started, and I'm wondering where that's gone and whether our school is taking the lead on that, because I think that one of the ways that our school could be better is to be a citizen of this Wabanaki Nation and serve the community. We have students that would be also tuition students because they're coming from students at least from Indian Island, but I think that having a focus and a specialty that focuses on the Wabanaki and specifically the Penobscot in curriculum would be a positive thing, and I'd like to hear about your thoughts on that.
I mean, I agree. We, right here in Orono, I think some people who live in the Northeast kind of tend to forget the Native American population. It's much harder to do when you live out west because they're, but here in Orono, we do have this, I was just talking about cultural opportunities. We do have a cultural opportunity. We do, one of our 5 main feeding schools to the high school is Indian Island K through 8 school. And that has traditionally been a fairly strong pipeline, and I think that's valued. I know it kind of ebbs and flows based on the energy of teachers at the high school, but there have been efforts. For example, a couple years ago, there was a great program where they brought in a Wabanaki basket maker and got lots of students involved in that process and learning about that. So I agree, it could and should probably be stronger in the curriculum as well.
I agree that it's something that we should support and certainly something we should take the lead on. Whether or not we've got a signature program in that area, I don't know enough about what goes on at the other schools in the state to say one way or the other on that, but I can certainly say, at least at ASA and at the middle school, I have yet to have a student in the high school. I will next year, but certainly at ASA in the middle school, Native American culture is certainly something that is regularly taught and worked with on the students. I don't know the particulars of this most recent version because I think it was directed at the 7th grade, and I do not have a 7th grader right now, but there was just in the past few weeks a relatively large set of Native American cultural programming. Native American Studies faculty were brought in from campus to talk to students. We did have some Native American artisans and craftspeople come in and work with the students, and I do think there was some basket making. But the Native American culture is certainly part of our curriculum in the Orono schools. I think that's a great thing, and certainly, like anything else, it could be made stronger.
Okay, another question?
Hello, I'm Daniel LaPointe, 201 Kelly Road. I've heard a lot of macro reaching out. I think reaching in is better. I think the community here needs our school here, focused here. You've talked about diversity, political correctness by the sounds of it. Where is our American civics in the school system? Where is it promoted? Are you any part of that? Can you tell me, talk to me, answer that question? Are you familiar with our American civics in the school system today being taught?
Well, I'm a political scientist who does American politics, so I think I'm qualified to answer that. Yes, it's a very important topic. There's no doubt about that. I'm an extremely strong supporter of civics education in our schools. I do think that the Orono schools do a very good job in the social sciences. We have introduced even some new courses to make the program even stronger. There's an AP American Government course that's being offered, which was not offered previously. Social studies, history, civics, anthropology, maybe less so economics, but a little bit there as well, although they would dispute whether or not they're actually a social science. Our strong offerings across all three schools, and I think that's a great thing in terms of whether or not we're a part of it. I would think that serving as public officials and, in my estimation, modeling how a board should work, I think, yeah, we are part of that. So, again, like anything else, can be made stronger, but I'm pretty positive about where we are on that.
Brian?
Guess I'm going to start by questioning the idea that diversity and civics are opposed to each other. I think they go hand in hand. And on top of that, I would say civics is a strong component of our schools. We, at every level. In some districts, it's very easy to get focused on reading, writing, arithmetic, and I think this district does a strong job in the social studies. We just added a half FTE in teaching at the high school in social studies. We have a considerable amount of American government and all kinds of extracurriculars from student government, speech and debate, activities that let students learn and practice civics as well. And I think personally living in a small town and being part of a community where you actually can make a difference is a big part of exposing people to civics.
Okay, next question.
Thank you. My question is...
Dan, there's other people.
Oh, okay.
Wait until we exhaust it, then you can get up and ask a second question. Judy.
I'm going to ask two questions at once. My name is Judy Sullivan. I live on Forest Ave. I would like to have each of you kind of describe what the phrase fiscal responsibility means to you. And then since you both have been serving, how has that definition, how have you implemented that? How have you used that to make some critical decisions over the last few years?
And Brian, I think you're first.
Okay. So, well, I think it's impossible to talk about the finances of the schools without just recognizing the reality on the ground, which is the state is putting less and less into the schools than every year. This year, they didn't even cover our increase in enrolled number of, they didn't cover the cost of increased enrollment and the cost of increased special education. They didn't even begin to touch the cost of living for our teachers. So the reality is there's a very fierce headwind in this state against the schools and against the town too, for that matter, against all local functions. And so really sitting in this seat in the last few years, the choice has been raise taxes, cut services. That's the cards that the state keeps dealing to us. And I see my job as finding the balance, and my compass for finding that balance is lots of talk to citizens and where the citizens are at. They're the ones who pay ultimately. They're the ones who suffer or don't suffer from good schools and bad schools, and that's my compass, is what the citizens want on that.
Okay, Mark?
I would echo everything Brian said. I would start by defining fiscal responsibility as the responsible use of public funds, being careful about what we use, being accountable for the money that we are asking from Orono residents. Brian's right, we get a far bigger list of wants and needs seemingly every year, along with a smaller set of funds to pay for it. So really the choice is a difficult one. It's either cut services or increase taxes, and we have got to be very careful about that, and we scrutinize every request that comes in, and we try and figure out what people of Orono value and act accordingly. And unfortunately, given what we're getting from the state, and doesn't show that there's any signs of that changing, we're going to continue to have to make these tough choices. I think budgeting is the hardest thing that we do on the board, at least in my opinion.
Next question. Got time for a few more, Cheryl? Did you have one?
Hi, Cheryl Robertson, Penobscot Street. I want to just bring this like local. I want to talk about the weather. I know this winter's been horrible. Will there be a conversation in the school board about maybe next year, like early releases, and because I think kind of we were talking a little bit about how the weather is shifting and changing, and right. We've got kids that have to get to school at early release times and then again late start times. But it doesn't seem like Orono has. It seems like that shifts a little bit, and we aren't necessarily. I don't know what to say as a parent. I never know like what's going to happen. Does the school board have any control over that, or will there be conversations about what's happening with our climate in the next few years?
I guess first, yes, the school board does have influence over that decision. I can also say the conversation is one that has already been started and is now ongoing. We did in the last, I can't remember if it was 1 year ago or 2 years ago, set up a policy for delayed start, which we did not have in place before, so that is now there. That is done at the discretion of the superintendent. And we are discussing, we haven't put it formally on an agenda yet, but we have had informal discussions about a policy surrounding early release as well. So the conversation's already ongoing. I agree with you that the weather is becoming more and more unpredictable and more extreme, and as a result of that, everybody focuses on the big macro elements to that, but it also has some very local micro elements, and that is the part that we can and are dealing with. So great question. Thank you.
Brian?
So yeah, the board is involved at the strategic level. So we set the policies for early release and late starts. Traditionally, just as Mark mentioned a year or two ago, we brought in the notion of an early release. And then the other thing the board does is they set the number of snow days predicted in advance when we do the school calendar. At the level of the day-to-day calls, that by law and by policy is the superintendent's choice. I think our superintendent has had a very hard year. We lost our first snow day in October. That hasn't happened in a while. And I think she's been doing a great job, and it's one of these things where you're always going to annoy somebody with your decision. So I think she's done a great job. I think going forward, really, I mean, there's not a lot of flexibility we have left. We could, right now, early releases require notice the prior night, and the reason for that is there's a lot of parents with young children who have difficulty arranging daycare, so I'm not in a rush to change that.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left for this session, but I do have one write-in question from Fran Neubauer I'd like to get in. And the question is, this is the second time within recent memory that the school board elections that candidates are running unopposed. Why do you think that this is happening? Brian, I think you're up first.
Well, of course, I would like to think it because everybody's happy with the current candidates, but I don't know. I think it ebbs and flows a little bit. A couple years ago, all the town council positions were barely getting filled, and there were multiple people running for the school board. I think we're a small town, and there's just a little bit of chunkiness in where people run or don't run. We've certainly, I think this is the first non-competitive election that I remember for the school board in a number of years, and I hope we have competitive elections going forward again. I think it's a good part of a good democracy, and I think it's important to districts to have conversations and discuss opinions.
Okay, Mark, did you have any comment?
I would agree with Brian. I hope the reason is because people are happy with the current iteration of the board and see no need for change. That being said, I would also agree that a healthy democracy requires choice for voters. I do think Brian's right that this is the first election in a few cycles where there's been no opposition. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the case. Sure, we'd always like more people to run. I would always encourage people who are interested in public service to run for whatever office appeals to them. If I had to speculate as to maybe why there aren't more candidates this time, I think it'd be foolish. I don't really know, but it is, any kind of public service is a fair amount of time commitment and work, and there's a lot of people who are stretched thin and maybe are unable to do that. But that's just speculation. I really just don't know the answer to that.
Okay, well, this is the perfect segue into the next section for this evening, where we have council candidates, where we have 6 candidates. So we're going to take a break for a few minutes. We'll get the dais set up for the council candidates. Number 3.
Maybe she went to the restroom.
I will give her a minute on this. Okay, while Maya's taking her chair, I'll remind everybody we'll have a 2-minute opening statement, and then we'll open the floor to questions. We had a good round of questions for the school board candidates. I hope we have a similar enthusiasm from the audience for the council candidates. Okay, we'll start with, we've drawn numbers for random order, and Ruben drew number 1. Ruben, 2 minutes.
I have to hold the button.
Yeah, I'm sorry, on the microphones, if you got to press the button on the microphone to talk, and try to keep it about 3 or 4 inches from your mouth to get so we pick up the sound well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ruben Dinninger. I'm a graduate student at the University of Maine. I'm running for Orono Town Council because I believe we need to make our democracy more accessible to widespread and active participation. Democracy has to be about more than just voting once or twice a year, or at the most, coming to a town council meeting as a spectator and maybe making a brief comment or question. Democracy should mean active participation. In order to build this kind of vibrant democracy where people are cooperating with their neighbors to solve local problems, I believe we should experiment with electronic voting and discussion software that would make it possible for people to engage in political dialogue and vote even if they cannot attend meetings. We should also experiment with neighborhood assemblies where residents meet to discuss and vote on local issues. Obviously, the facilities here are not, it's not possible to have the entire town of Orono in these chambers. Ultimately, political power needs to be transferred away from representative bodies such as the town council and into direct democratic structures that we should start building. As it is, many students and other community members who lack transportation, in addition to people who must work or care for children in the evenings, are left out of the political process, and I think this is a serious problem. Participatory democracy is important, I believe, because it's the basis of social, economic, and environmental justice. For instance, we really do not have adequate public transportation in this area, and I think that building participatory democracy is the way to address that. Because once people are making decisions about the priorities of their community, I think we're going to see those priorities change and be more centered around meeting the needs of people in the community with things like public transportation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sam Coons. I'm running for my 2nd term on town council. I live in the family-friendly neighborhood of the Sailor Development on Mainwood Avenue. My amazing four-year-old daughter knows almost every dog in the neighborhood by name, and most of the people too. I've worked in higher education since 2002, currently at Husson University as an academic advisor. Before this, I worked for several years as a career counselor and academic advisor at the University of Maine, where I also earned my master's degree in higher education. Since 2008, I've been a co-leader of a community service and volunteerism-focused youth group called YOP, Young Adults with Pizzazz, which is based out of the Church of Universal Fellowship. I moved to Orono from Burlington, Vermont in 2007, drawn by a family connection, but Orono quickly became my home. It's my community. I'm a father. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a supporter of and participant in the arts. I shop locally. I care deeply about the community, the schools, the village and neighborhoods, and the university, and the connections between them all. Orono is a multifaceted and diverse town. There is a cultural vitality and vibrancy in this community that is flourishing. We have an amazing library, now with an amphitheater. We are surrounded by natural beauty with trails, land trusts, and other hidden gems. These are just a few of the resources found here and the reasons we all call Orono home. The university is an incredible resource. It's a vital component of the community and the economy. I feel we have a healthy working relationship with UMaine, and I know both the town and the university are dedicated to fostering an equally healthy relationship with our student citizens. A large part of this involves housing, but it is also important to ensure that there's affordable housing opportunities for families, be it new or upgraded existing housing. A significant part of our comprehensive plan addresses being an attractive town for families, both with our strong schools and the many amenities that I mentioned earlier. We need to continue taking steps to make this a reality. Skip that one. It has been an honor to serve. My first term has also been an incredible learning experience. As I said 3 years ago, I have no personal agenda other than wanting the best for this wonderful, vibrant town, nor do I have any higher political aspirations. This remains to be true, and it would be an honor to serve again on town council. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Perry, and I'm seeking your support for another term on the Orono Town Council. I've lived in Orono for over 50 years, first as a university student, then as an employee of the Orono School Department, and more recently as a retiree. My wife Connie and I raised our 2 children here, and they greatly benefited from the education they received and the resources the community offered. Orono has been a wonderful place to live, and I look forward to giving back to the community through continued service on the Town Council. In addition to serving 4 terms on the council, I have served as chair of the council's finance committee. I previously served as a member of the Orono Planning Board, the Orono Library Foundation, and several other community committees. For the past 6 years, I have represented our senatorial district on the Maine Municipal Association's Legislative Policy Committee, which establishes positions on all pieces of state legislation affecting Maine towns and cities. I decided to seek another term on the council in order to continue my involvement in the important work ahead. This work includes continuing to implement the recommendations found in the comprehensive plan, working to develop budgets to balance the needs of the community with our finite resources, maintaining a high-quality service for Orono residents, and advocating at the state level for legislation that benefits municipalities, and working to make Orono an even more attractive community for all residents. I look forward to the important work and believe I can make a contribution to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Dan?
Hello, I'm Daniel Lapointe. I run every year. I have a reason. I suffer with taxes. I think that they're out of sight. I don't think that there's a proper plan to take in control of the taxes. I think the town has acted perhaps maybe not in the best interest of its people. We're Americans. We are diverse, but we come united behind liberty and equal justice. The problem is that representation isn't as was said, the first candidate, not getting to the people. Why is this so? I think the town observer should be much more in detail and much more informative. We had a home rule, and I think that that's been discarded. This was done through the legislature, and it grants a great deal of broad authority here. But the issue is here in Orono is one of fiscal responsibility more than anything else. And I think that we've been let down. When Bush was in, they said, we do not support any action of war. Recently, there was a resolution, Sanctuary City, here in Orono. We had 80 veterans shut this thing down. There are problems with capital investments that are not being put on open bid. I think some of the checks and balances, there's a silence in this river of paperwork that doesn't get to the people of the town itself. And at one point, the town was in discussion with one of the large facilities on Park Street.
Okay, Dan.
All right, thank you.
Cheryl?
Hi. Thank you for coming. My name is Cheryl Robertson. This is my first time running for town council. It's my first time kind of getting into this this arena. I've lived in Orono for 11 years. I also moved to Orono to raise a son. I'm from Bangor originally. I grew up in Bangor. I have two older daughters who went to the Bangor school system, but I really wanted Alex to be in a different locality. I have a doctorate in education. I have a master's degree in English literature. I am a lecturer at the University of Maine and the University of Maine Augusta. I also run an after-school program here in Orono for Orono families. Wasakeg After School. It's a small business down on Mill Street. I'm trained in restorative justice. I've been a consultant and a facilitator for restorative justice circles and restorative practice circles. So it's interesting to hear the school board members talk about that. I think one of the reasons that I want to run for town councilor is because I really feel like I really believe in family, and I believe in neighborhoods, and I believe in community. I think Orono is like the epitome of that. I really love that we have an Islamic center on Park Street, and that we are neighbors and friends and family with the Penobscot Nation. And I really feel like the time has come to start giving back to Orono for what Orono has given to me and has helped me to raise my son and my family. I think that it's a great place to be, and I hope that I can contribute in positive ways, because I really like shopping local. I like being here. I think it's a great place to live and to grow. Thank you.
Okay, Maya.
My name is Maya Denninger. I'm a graduate of the University of Maine, a college English instructor, and I'm also running for Maine State Senate here in District 5. I'm running as a democratic socialist on a platform focused on transitioning to renewable energy, supporting and defending the citizens' initiative process, increasing access to health care, food, and transportation for Mainers, and building an economy that works for everyone. I will admit that I'm new to politics. Many of you won't recognize me, and I can't pretend to be an expert on municipal policies. Probably questions will be asked tonight that I won't be able to answer, questions dealing with the intricate details of zoning laws and snow removal. Like most graduate students I know, I've had to take and teach evening classes since moving here 5 years ago, which severely limited my ability to be involved in local politics. I even felt at times that there was a disconnect between the student population of Orono and the locals. I am a local, though. I graduated 3 years ago, and I still live here, and I hope to continue to live here for the foreseeable future. I think it's a mistake to think of students as just a transient population. When people move here to attend the university, they commit to spending years in this community, and sometimes they stay. All too often, I realize they don't, and part of what we should focus on is getting young people to stick around after they graduate, because we need their ideas and their energy and their innovation. And I think that involving them in the political process can allow them to feel more invested in this community. I also think we have a number of disenfranchised voters in Orono in general, international students in particular, and I can speak more to that later, single parents and round-the-clock workers, and I believe in striving for a truly participatory democracy here in Orono, in Maine, and in the U.S. By utilizing technology and implementing things like assembly model decision-making and participatory budgeting, we can make sure the people of Orono, all of them, become politically informed and invested in their community. I'm involved in politics now because it seemed like every day on the state and federal level, our elected representatives were passing policies that were hurting the people they were meant to serve. I believe in building democracy from the ground up, and I'm excited to begin through municipal and state level elections. I'm not an expert, but I'm a fast learner and a good listener.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we'll open up the floor to questions. Ruben will be taking the first shot at the first question. Have a question, please?
I'll start off simply. What do you love about Orono?
Okay, Ruben.
There's a lot of things I love about Orono. I love the Orono trail system. I love the University of Maine. I love downtown. There's places I like to go. But I guess the correct answer for this context would be to say something about how I love the people and my neighbors and everything. But honestly, you know, as a student, I don't really feel like I've always been a part of the community. And I think that the student population often gets isolated from the rest of the community. So I do love the people in Orono, but what I would like to see is building building even more of a stronger community here where people know each other better and are cooperating and doing things together.
Okay, so, Sam?
Yeah, thank you. A great question. I think I covered a lot of things in my opening statement about the many attributes we have here, things that I love about it. I moved here from Burlington, Vermont, and it was a tough sell to get me to move here from Burlington, Vermont. I love Orono. I do love the people. Because there's like a sense of their feet on the ground a little bit. There's something about, I don't know, the reality of Orono, I guess. It's the winters, Chris. It's the winters. I love the winters. But it's a great community. The fact that you can know people easily, the fact it's a small town, so there's a lot of overlap. I love the student population as well. I worked with a number of them, and it was always great to bump into them at perhaps an establishment downtown. I won't name names, but you know, when you could actually talk and interact with students is great. So I think the doors are open. I think they need to find their way across the bridge. They're welcome.
Tom?
I think it's obvious we all love Orono. I grew up in a community very much the same size as Orono. I went to a school system very much the same size as our Orono schools, and I like the size of the community. I like the opportunities it offers. I really enjoy many aspects of this community. I have wonderful neighbors, and I've always had wonderful neighbors in several different areas of the town that I've lived in.
Okay, Dan?
My family's been here for many centuries. I'm descended from Acadians, early Acadians, and from Maliseet. My family owned a great deal of land years ago. We still have some of it today, sort of an heirloom site, if you will. I'm in western Orono, quite a great deal difference from downtown Orono, but Orono used to be thriving many years ago and its diversity was phenomenal. We lack that today. I love the forest, and you know, in Americans we have a creed, and Mainers are hardworking people, and we have our families. And the culture of the early Acadians, which kind of runs through in the different families, is very rich, and it's very sustaining. So families here, many generations, and I attended Maine Maritime Academy. Thank you.
Okay, Cheryl.
Anyone who knows me knows that I think Orono should be like a made-for-TV movie. I love this. I had an epitome. I'll tell you a story. Walking with my son to downtown Orono, I think it was Orono Days one year, and at the top of the hill was an LL Bean camp with like all the gear and the bicycles, and at the bottom of the hill, this is by the high school, was a reggae band. And I think I had this epiphany, and I went, I just love this town. What a great place. My son and his friends are on their bikes and they're going down the hill, and you know, and I'm just thinking this is a great place to grow up. So I love the smallness, but I also love the vibrancy and the diversity and the people. I think that this is I think this is an awesome community, and I'd like to see it stay that way.
Okay, Maya.
So Ruben got to answer first, and if you haven't guessed yet, we're married, and so we love a lot of the same things. So he hit a lot of them. I also love the trails. I also love the proximity to the university and downtown. We are very lucky to live right in the middle of both, so they're both walkable. I love how small the downtown is, and we moved here from New Orleans, and I didn't think I would love how small the downtown is, but I do. I've really grown to feel very at home here. I like knowing the names of the people who own the establishments we eat in, and I like the proximity to nature, and I like how quiet it is. And so I think that's part of why I've already graduated, and Ruben will graduate soon, but I don't think we don't want to have to leave. We want there to be economic opportunities that allow us to stay here in Maine.
Okay, thank you all. Next question, please.
Don't be scared. It's me. Hi, Megan Gardner, Bennick Road. My question's about the comprehensive plan. I am always interested to hear what people's priorities are when it comes to that document, since it is sort of the guiding force of what a lot of town council is doing. It is rife with suggestions, but not a lot of directives or mandates of any kind. So it really comes to whatever the individual councilors or the collective council's priorities are. And so I would really like to hear from folks, what are your top priorities specifically out of the things in the comprehensive plan?
Okay, Sam, you're up first.
Thank you. I think so many of the things in the comprehensive plan are sort of interwoven, they're connected. I think attracting families, increasing the tax base in many ways, but bringing them in here, that's also going to help populate the schools with Orono students. I think also very important to increase economic development here too. I think we've been making some great moves in that direction, but I think they go hand in hand. If we have industry, small industries perhaps, attracting them, and that will help attract the families as well. That will, I think, naturally lead into helping out with putting in other amenities that we may need to support that, perhaps bike paths or playgrounds, that sort of thing. So I think it's very connected, but I think ultimately it's to increase the population and the vitality of the town.
Tom?
I think the comprehensive plan is a very impressive document. The process that was used to develop it was excellent. Broad cross-section of the community participated in the committee. A number of public forums were held, and they were very well attended in this room. The council took the recommendations from that group and has worked through them, has tried to develop some priorities. I think it's hard to pick out one thing in that comprehensive plan that's the highest priority, but certainly things like affordable housing, attracting families, and economic development are high priorities for me. And we'll continue to work through that plan.
Okay, Dan?
I'm not happy with the comprehensive plan. The thing is, it's basically fraud and inducing contracts. It assumes that fascistly it has a right to your property. It owns every yard of earth, all the water. We never gave the town the right to do that. It has a fiduciary duty to run and administer to the businesses of the town, not confiscate our rights, our children's rights, reduce the amount of property that is available or the sizes of lots, increase taxes on account of that. The idea that it promotes happiness, well, there are some winners and there are some losers. Those people that lose are their property rights, their individual rights, and it's erased. And the process is put together by social scientists right here.
Okay, Cheryl?
I have to agree with Sam and Tom. I think one of the things that struck me was family housing, and I'm a family, and I know that family housing is really unaffordable sometimes here. I was really taken with the Orono Village Association and the beautification kind of thing, and I understand that it's been disbanded, for a year. 2016, I think they stopped doing it. So I got a chance to talk to some of the local merchants down there about this, kind of informally, and I'd like to see that put back put back together again, but in a different way, so that our local merchants aren't taxed for having a flower box outside their store, you know, or something like that. Like some kind of creative and innovative way to get that back, or to get some kind of beautification back into Orono parks. I like the idea of more parks and more playgrounds. I'm also interested in the economic development piece of that as well.
Okay, Maya.
I think that it's always a problem here and in a lot of Maine getting people to stay and attracting people to the area. In attracting people to the area, I think we do need economic development of a sort. I do think it's important to remember what it is that pushes people to move away. So I definitely agree that affordable housing needs to be a real focus. If people can't afford to find a way to live here, they won't continue to live here. I also think there needs to be not just job opportunities, but opportunities for jobs that provide an income that one can live on. And I think that can be difficult to find as well. So I think those are important priorities if we're going to keep this town vibrant and going.
Okay, Ruben.
Regrettably, I'm not very familiar with the comprehensive plan. However, with regards to economic development, I think it's really important that we begin really supporting a 21st century economy by supporting worker cooperatives. Worker cooperatives are more economically resilient than traditional businesses, and they create better jobs with more satisfying careers for the workers, and they also build more wealth in the community than traditionally owned businesses. And I think that's what our focus needs to be when it comes to economic development.
Okay, all right. Next question from the audience. Lori, you're on the edge of your seat. You gave yourself away there.
Lori Osher from Mayo Street. So the comprehensive plan does talk about affordable housing and does talk about one of the reasons we would like to have more housing that's low cost but livable and attractive to buy right away and not have to fix is for families that maybe would be starting out, say, right after finishing UMaine. So there's a program in Bangor that's called Energy Smart Bangor, and the program takes money from the city of Bangor and distributes it to people in the town, the city of Bangor, that work with Efficiency Maine with their state program to make their buildings more energy efficient. So I would like to hear your thoughts, because as you heard about the school board, the same issue with the town council and town budget, which is shrinking amount of money coming to the town, but many things that we want to provide for our town that we have provided, and many of those we have to not provide. And if we want to provide them all with shrinking money coming in, then we have to get the money from some other place. So it's a challenge to introduce anything that's new, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this idea that we would take small bits of money. In the case of Bangor, they give allotments of $200 and to $500 to $250, depending on the particular thing that someone does to make their home more energy efficient. So for each person that takes advantage of the program, the town might be paying out an average of $500. So just want to hear your thoughts.
Oh, sure. Excuse me. Well, we have had a chance to talk about this issue with Lori, and I think she brought a very interesting concept to us, and I'm glad that she shared the information, what was happening in Bangor. I like the concept. I think it speaks. It has a lot of good points. I think we always struggle with our finite resources, and we've talked about some other ways we might be able to fund a small pilot project part of it, and I would be probably supportive of that if we could find some additional resources.
Okay, Dan.
Open for business is a good statement, not closed. Opportunity within this community, I mean, on the interstate, and I've said this before, I came off the interstate and I saw it, welcome to Drunk Thursdays. Nothing bad about the businesses. I love beer. But is that the one business that's flourishing in Orono? Where's the rock companies? They drove them out. You know, towers. We have towers, but they've frightened people to death for putting them in. Rock quarries, construction places. Lane Construction was driven out of this community. He was one of the highest excise payers. All his equipment was registered. This prejudice within this community, the short-sightedness, the word open for business is what we need to do. That's what creates vibrancy. Thank you.
Cheryl.
Before you start my time, can I ask Lori to just kind of clarify the question? I'm not really clear what the question is.
Okay. Lori? Succinctly.
The state has a program that if people make their buildings more energy efficient, the state gives them money. The state gets the money from Efficiency Main Trust. So it's not tax money, it's money that comes off of when everybody buys electricity or it's other ways. It comes to the RGGI, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So Efficiency Main Trust gives that money to people when they fix their homes. So what Bangor said is, and we know from the years of this program running is people who have more money are more likely to fix their homes and then get a little bit of money from the state. So Bangor wanted the people who had less money to take advantage of this program. So Bangor said, we're going to add a little bit onto whatever somebody does the state program from Efficiency Maine. We're going to make this basically sweeten the pot a little bit more and put another incentive.
Okay.
And what they found is that 45% of the money that they spent from Bangor in the first year went to people whose homes were worth $150,000 and less.
Okay.
Those are exactly the dollar value of homes in Orono that are really, right now, in such disrepair that when people buy the property for that amount, they have to put a lot in to fix it.
Right.
Because they were previously rental properties that maybe weren't being taken care of. So when someone wants to buy it as a single-family owner-occupied home, there's a disincentive to buy in Orono. You could buy in Bangor, and the city of Bangor will help you fix it.
The question is?
So the question is, what do you think about that idea? Because it means it's money from the town that goes to individual people.
Yeah.
Not, people who, it's not a handout to everybody.
I see what you're saying now.
So it's sort of, I'm asking you, what do you think about that kind of program? We've not done nothing like this in Orono, and Bangor is one of the only cities in the state has done this.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying now. I wasn't quite sure what the question was. I am all about creative and innovative ways to help people. I think that we have to start thinking outside the box. I think that number crunching is going to be huge. It's probably huge already. I really look at the big picture, and I think I think it's important. And I like programs like that. If it doesn't come out of somebody else's pocket, if there's, if the taxpayers aren't paying for, if you're not asking for more money from people that are already struggling or being challenged by economics, especially in this day and age, in this climate, this political climate, I think that anything that you can do that's innovative and creative and really thinking like, this is not status quo. This is something new and different, and this is what we need for our people here. I approve. I would go for it.
Okay, Maya.
I think it's great to incentivize environmentally friendly behavior. I think, as Lori already mentioned, though, a lot of times it's not always affordable to be environmentally friendly, so I wouldn't want to be leaving people out of the loop. I think it sounds like a great program, but I also think we need to make it easier for people to be environmentally friendly in free ways. So, for instance, even just recycling, we have one sort recycling in a lot of Orono, but not in a lot of the apartment complexes. So in my apartment complex, we can't recycle. So then there are easy, relatively cheap ways to get people to be more environmentally friendly for free. They don't have to have money to invest spending on their, if they even own homes. A lot of us live in apartments, so it's not even our choice. In any case, I think it sounds like a great program, but it should be part of a wider effort to help people be able to afford to be environmentally sustainable here.
Okay, Ruben.
I'd like to echo what most everyone else said. I think it sounds like a good program, but I'd also like to take this opportunity to respond to, I think what part of the question was about is the issue of shrinking town budgets, which is a larger issue. But I would just like to point out that I think what we really need to be doing is not just trying to adapt ourselves to this situation, but actually to organize in our communities and fight back and demand that our communities are getting the funding that they are entitled to from the state. So I think that's a really important issue, an important point that needs to be made. Thank you.
Sam?
I fully support Bangor giving our residents money. I may have missed the mark, though. So I support, I think this is a great idea, and when you mentioned it before, I thought it was a great idea. Like Tom, I just have the question, where would that come from? You know, so there's that pragmatic end, you know, of the whole thing, given that we are always talking about high taxes and that sort of thing, and how we can keep that manageable, and where does it go from the budget, because it has to come from somewhere. So if there was funding available, if we could find that, or if there's grant funding perhaps, I think that would be fantastic. I also want to echo what Maya said a little bit about, it's a greater issue. This is important. This is a green town. We take the environment very seriously. And I think, you know, education is incredibly important, increasing ways of recycling. It's a tricky issue with the apartment complexes and the zero sort. You know, there's a lot going on behind the curtains there, but I think increasing ways to reduce consumption, make less trash, et cetera, is all part of it. So education is key. I think it's a great idea, though.
Okay, next question from the audience. Chris?
Chris Lutein, Peter Street. You mentioned something about grant writing. What if we had someone paid by the town council to do that as a job, grant writing? We have educational facilities that need maybe grant monies to go for it. You're just talking about this, idea about, helping people that might need. How would you feel about hiring someone just to write grants?
Okay, Dan, you'll start off.
Wow. Love grants, subsidies. I think they're wonderful. However, there are performance factors that need to be looked at. There needs to be criteria on this. Low interest loans that incentivize things. There was a great deal of talk of ladders of opportunity. That kind of fell through, and that program. The idea that we can help the community at large. There is no language within this community that helps any businesses other than tax them or restrict their rights for expansion. Pretty sad. This myopic, without any foresight, has harmed our community and is one of the things that has raised our taxes all out of proportions. Yeah, I like grants. I think that they're a great idea. Thank you.
Cheryl.
Good question. As a grant writer, I know how difficult it is, but I don't know. Do towns typically or normally have someone who does something like that, who goes out and seeks that kind of funding? I don't know. I don't know how that would work. However, though, again, I really think that any idea, any way that you can help the town or any way that you can put more resources back into the town, regardless of how it happens, is a good idea. I am opposed to raising taxes again. This is a highly taxed area. It really is, and it's hard to afford a house when you've got to pay $4,000 in real estate taxes, and then to keep asking for money. But I think grant writing is definitely on the table for sure.
I think hiring a full-time professional grant writer sounds like a great idea. I think it should be done right away. Somebody should be hired as soon as possible. I have a master's degree in English, and like most millennials, I have copies of my resume on hand at any time.
Ruben.
I think it sounds potentially like a good idea, but I just frankly don't know enough about the issue to really give an answer.
Sam.
I think it's a great idea. I think grants are important. I think being able to do that. Our current staffing situation is the staff that we have now, they work hard. They're pretty tapped out. So coming up with a new role to put on that would be lovely, but we'd probably have people walking out the door. I have no idea. But it's, but also to be able to add a whole new position, that's a huge expense as well. And that comes back to the whole thing. So it's a great idea. I do believe in welcoming research and that sort of thing. I could also see a problem if we had a grant person, all of a sudden everyone's going to have an idea for something and their door is going to get kicked in with people wanting a grant for whatever. Which is great, but there has to be a way to have that communication channel. If people are passionate about certain things and find a grant, I think there should be a way to bring that information to the town so we could take a look at that possibly. But I don't know if we'd be able to have a full-time grant writing person, but I do think it's a great source of income that could help us out down the road.
Tom?
So I think it's always important to look for additional ways for revenue other than, or in addition to taxes. But I also want to emphasize we do apply for grants. This isn't out of the blue. It wasn't too many years ago that we had a grant that bought a $750,000 fire engine, and that was pretty impressive. There are smaller grants that happen each year. So our people are alert to grant opportunities. If you had a full-time person, could you look for more opportunities and spend more time applying for them? Probably you could. But don't think that we aren't already, our staff isn't already looking at these opportunities and trying as best they can to sort out opportunities that are going to be good for the town of Orono and applying for them.
Okay, next question from the audience. Cecile.
Cecile Ferguson. A lot of you talked about affordable housing in Orono. It's a great idea, but what we've seen, I think, in the past year in terms of housing has been huge apartment complexes that are designed strictly for students. What's your attitude on this? Would you continue this type of expansion, or would you put the brakes on it? And would you ideally go back to a community where students and local residents mingle a little more, as it used to be in my street, where we did complain about parties occasionally, but we do get to know each other, and I think it was a great feature of Orono. Thank you.
And Cheryl, you're first on this one.
I live on Penobscot Street, which is right down the street from the two giant, I call them unsupervised dorms. Yeah, I'm there. I'm also a single mom, and housing is tough. In Orono, it's tough to buy a house. It's tough to pay the taxes here. It's tough to raise a family. And I think most that I rent a home, but I rent a home. It's important for me to live in a home and not an apartment. As a professional woman, so I would have to say, I would say yes. I would put the brakes on any more giant conglomerate condominium type places. But how to get housing to a level where, they're not charging by the bedroom, that'd be something I'd like to work on, I think.
Okay, Maya.
I also hate those large complexes. They're terrible. And in fact, I was collecting signatures just last night for my state Senate race, and the walls and the stairwells are literally made out of particle board, exposed particle board in some of the complexes. So I think it's a problem both because it discourages intermingling between students and the community, and because they're often not very high quality housing options. So I think we need more affordable quality housing options as well. I think rents are disproportionately high in this area, given what many people make, and given the fact that many people who live here are students with a very limited income too. So I think looking into cooperative housing circumstances would also be a good place to look.
Okay, Ruben.
What we really need is for tenants to organize into unions to engage in collective bargaining with landlords. And ultimately, housing should be owned by the people who live there, not by landlords. And we can take steps in that direction by supporting cooperative housing, as Maya mentioned, and supporting tenants' organizations. And rent control is a start, but it's ultimately just a Band-Aid. The real solution to housing in the long term is cooperative ownership of housing. And young people statistically are not having children and not buying houses because we can't afford to do so. So I think that cooperative housing is really a solution for the future, not just as an alternative to the big apartment complexes people are complaining about, but also just more in general.
Sam?
Yeah, I think we got the big apartment thing pretty well covered. But I know in the past we've looked at, when I think of affordable housing here, I think of if there'd be a way to develop areas where we could put in small capacity, if you will, for just small affordable houses for families so they could have that and increased neighborhood. There was talk a while ago, there was a whole exploration of the potential Black Bear Heights, which didn't work out because of vernal pool issues and that sort of thing, environmental impact, which would have been a whole new road construction. There could be other areas where if we had developers interested in this sort of thing, there might be a way to incentivize them to come in and develop small increases in certain neighborhoods, that sort of thing. And it would be an incremental thing. I don't see like all of a sudden we're going to wipe out, hundreds of acres of a forest and put up a new neighborhood. But I think there are ways that this could be explored, and I think there may be some, currently there could be some discussions or just talking about this sort of thing. But I think it's a great idea.
Okay, Tom?
Well, I think we all agree that we're maxed out on large apartment complexes, and I would not support nor encourage any further development in that direction. We have already done a few good things, I think, in terms of affordable housing, and I'd like to hope that in the near future we're going to see some reaction to that. Looking at lot sizes in certain areas of the community and making smaller lots available in some of our densely populated areas for housing, I think has been a good step. Making it easier for single-family homeowners to create an apartment in their home or to have an apartment in an adjoining and in a building also on their property, I think is a step in the right direction. And I think there are some tools available for economic enhancements for developers who might want to focus on affordable single-family housing in the community. There's a lot of available lots in our town that are moving very, very slowly.
Okay, I think we're going to... Oh, no, you're right. Dan, you're up. I'm sorry.
Thank you. The comprehensive plan is fascist modeling. It is rigid, and it doesn't take in the fact that families are dynamic, and they change. Their happiness and joy is a necessity, be it that they rent, they have a mother-in-law, they have to put housing up. There's no talk or backing up of the lot sizes. Vernal pools is essentially a lie, and the water rights have been stolen by the UN by Agenda 21. Versus the river work out here, not one word from this town, yet they'll steal all our water rights. Tiny houses, wonderful things. The transient nature of those, trailer parks. We have these turn circles which prevent trailer parks. It's purposely done. That is the economic beginning for many families. How dare they act that way in that prejudice? You know, the short-sightedness, this fascist modeling makes my stomach turn. Thank you.
Okay, and we're ready for another question from the audience. Lori? Or Paul?
So we are the home to the University of Maine, and the University of Maine is an organization that does not need to pay taxes to the town. And the governor's speech tonight, he had a featured portion, started just about the same time that started, since I was late, I got to hear about it, that he is proposing that nonprofit organizations that have land be taxed to put money into the state. And so I don't propose that for Orono because I don't think it would really be possible. I think it's too far out, too impossible. But certainly the university does not pay taxes, and if it were a private business, that would be a lot of money coming into the town. So what are your ideas for interacting with the university to try to get them to be a better neighbor because they are able to use all the services of our town without actually paying taxes to our town. They pay a lump sum, they don't pay nothing, and we're very pleased to have that, and they're very generous in many ways. So this is not, I'm not saying this is a put down. I'm saying this to ask you, given that that's the situation, how as a town councilor would you try to enhance the relationship we have with the university? What would you be looking for from the university that they could be helping us do our job better as a town?
Okay, Maya, you're first up on this one.
I won't pretend to be knowledgeable enough to have much of an answer, but I think something you said is interesting. The university is not a private business, but in many ways it is, like many universities, run as a private business. Certainly, it brings in lots of profit for those who are in charge, and so I think it does seem fair to me that that there would be more of a reciprocal relationship between the university and the town. I think the university does what it can probably to take advantage of the town in many ways, as it takes advantage of its students and its adjuncts and its professors. And I think somewhere along the way, all of that money that is going somewhere could go back to the people who need it most.
Okay, Ruben.
So the cooperative extension is an example of an institution at the university that provides really valuable services to the community and to the state as a whole. So that's something that I think a model that could be applied to other things. For instance, the Women's Resource Center on campus they're having problems funding it, but that's the type of institution that could potentially be not just a service for students, but something that would be providing a really valuable service for the whole community. So that's one way that I think the town could really collaborate with the university to develop those kind of services, not just for students, but for the whole area.
Sam.
I think, well, it's important to acknowledge a couple things. I mean, first of all, the university is part of the UMaine system, and that's a whole nother kettle of fish there. I think the university does make a contribution to Orono that is around a 1.1 mil rate. That was short.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
I was
All right, so
getting direction from my boss.
All right. So, I mean, it's like the equivalent of about a 1.1 mil rate, which isn't even close to what our regular tax rate is here. So that's a bit of an issue. There are some things that are done in other communities. Another Greater Boston area has a pretty awesome pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, where what's that? Okay, well, this is my time, so I'm going to keep going here. They're timing me. So, but the thing is, you have the pilot program is some sort of pilot payment in lieu of taxes, where if they could provide possibly some value of services, be it similar to what Ruben mentioned, but also discount on gym memberships for community members, or discounts at the CCA, or anything, something like that, that adds something to it. There are some incredible facilities there that would be great to have more directly connected and more accessible for the community. That would add to the value of our community. We could also have maybe professors volunteering with our high school students or elementary or middle school students. There are lots of ways it could happen. I just don't know what their availability would be for that sort of thing, or the cost that would affect it as well.
Tom?
Yeah, I think the university is a tremendous asset, but we do recognize the fact that the value of the university property is about equal to the rest of Orono. So they are not paying taxes, obviously, on that entire huge block of property in buildings. I think we work hard, our staff works hard to develop a positive relationship with the university, and that benefits us in lots of ways, in terms of use of facilities, in terms of getting some expertise on certain issues, in terms of having some volunteers in our community. I think those things we ought to continue to emphasize and continue to grow. It's something that happens over time. This would be a wonderful question for the 4 candidates that are coming in over the next couple of weeks to interview as presidents of the university. So I hope somebody from the community will ask this same question to these presidential candidates.
Dan?
I'm absolutely delighted with the idea that land trusts pay taxes, or at least some fair share. Now, the university is a quasi-government organization. That's going to be kind of tough. But I love the idea of what was said about the Boston doing payment in lieu of. What a wonderful thing, families' happiness and joy. But don't restrict it to one part of a family, the whole family. The happiness and joy is all part of our ownership of land. And the thing is, to think that it would lessen our taxes and not be spent elsewhere is wonderful. The cooperative extension at the University of Maine, great program, but has been eroded over the years. And the boardwalk took students' land without payment. Now, I'll tell you, they owe us. We're the greatest amount of land set aside for land trust in the entire state, or one of the greatest, and they don't pay nothing.
Cheryl.
I think that, I mean, as a graduate of the University of Maine and a faculty member of the University of Maine, the University of Maine has provided my salary and all of those fun things, but I think it was probably the comprehensive planner, someone I was talking to, that said 80% of the faculty don't live in Orono. They live in other places. So, so I happen to be one that, you know, that stayed here. I think everything that everyone said, I wouldn't want to develop a contentious relationship with the university, but I do think they need to step up a little bit. Now, how you get them to do that, or who you talk to, or how you liaison with them, I mean, and even what Sam said with, you know, even more, even a better relationship with the high school, you know, or you know, educational resources, or the, you know, the rec center, or something that I'd like to not have to pay to park. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, is there another question? I have one if you don't. Judy. Okay.
I still remember my early days as a counselor, and one of the things that kind of surprised me was how quickly, as a newbie, you end up in the budgeting process. So, and one of the things which I found that we all struggle with as individuals, and I'm going to ask this question of you, is in the budgeting process, when it comes down to making those decisions, how do you manage your personal philosophy and how that might impact another individual whose philosophy might be not be in agreement with you? In other words, if you have a program that you're supportive that would increase taxes, and knowing full well that we do have a very diverse community, that there are going to be people who might not support that decision. So how do you manage that very delicate balance and remind yourself that the town is bigger than the village, and that the community is larger than the people you know?
Okay, Ruben, you'll be first up.
I think that's a really great question. And to me, I think the solution is simply, I mean, it's not simple, but to engage as much as possible the broadest participation that you possibly can with major decisions, including budgeting. So, of course, it's easier said than done, but I think that is really important because, as I've spoken about already, the student population, I think, really does not participate in the political process as much as they should, and I think that there are interests there that are not being represented. So I think just engaging numerically as many people as possible and using creative means to do so is really the best solution to that.
Sam?
I think that's a tricky thing, very much so, and it is a very there's a fine line, you know, that what we have to balance there. I think it's important when you take on a role like in town council or any elected position, it's not necessarily if somebody votes for me, I'm beholden to do what they bid. Okay, and I don't think that's the case. I think we have to listen. We have to listen to them all, and I agree that it's easy to look at the small circles of the people that we know, but the community is much larger than that. That's an excellent point. I think encouraging involvement with this, even tonight we have very few people compared to the seats we have here. I think it's important to really encourage more involvement with the process, make sure the voices are heard, and because that will help guide us. At the same time, on council, we have to take it all in and then percolate it through our own little heads and come up with really what's best. And that does come down to some really difficult decisions sometimes. It's not easy and it's not fun, but it's incredibly important.
Tom?
Judy, we're going to miss you not being able to help us make those decisions. You were very good at it. I think you start out with the philosophy that there are in any community an infinite number of needs. And there are also a finite amount of resources. So when you come to these budget issues, you have to get a lot of information so you really understand the impact of the request or the impact of the budget item. You have to listen to the input you're getting from the community, and then you have to philosophically make some decisions and base it on what is going to, in your mind, be best for the community.
Okay, Dan?
I think political correctness is finite. I think it limits your choices. I think the idea to listen and not over-talk a person bringing it forward. Public speaking's tough. Not everybody can do it. They do the best they can to bring those issues forward. The less is as great as the most elegant of speakers. The thing is, you know, we're diverse, and you always have to remember that, but we have liberty and equal justice, and it is our creed, and we're formed in our founding documents. We must not do things at limits, such as this comprehensive plan and dealing with other issues and keep an open mind. You know, there's more than one type of business. Wow, look at today in technology. It's phenomenal. Thank you.
Cheryl?
I have to budget all the time, every day, all the time, just to things happen and you know, on a grander scale, that's not anything that I really want to do, but I know as a town council you'll probably have to do it. I think that if, you know, on a bigger scale that I'm always a common good person, like what is best for the common good. But I also know that stuff happens, and that you have to be prepared for things to happen. And I live on limited resources, so I know how to make ends meet, and I know what needs to be set aside, and it is definitely something. I think it's a learning process for sure, and I think the newbies, you know, will have to learn how to do that. I hesitate to talk too much on it, but I do. Budgeting is always in my head to survive.
I think for me, managing my philosophical beliefs with the decisions I would have to make as a town councilor if elected, I'd like to think it would be easy, because I'd like to think that they align, that I would want to do whatever is going to be best for those in the community of Orono, especially those who are struggling most. I think participatory budgeting, as Ruben already mentioned, is a great way to really hone in on the areas that are most in need. And I also think that the loudest voices in a community and the loudest voices that participate in political processes like this are often people who are well off in the community. And a lot of times economic development means supporting business in ways that don't always translate to actually helping those who are struggling in the community. So for me, in budgeting, I would focus on helping those who are struggling, those who are housing insecure, food insecure, or healthcare insecure. And I think that should always be a priority.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Brian? I'm not going to get to ask it.
It's Brian McGill, Peter Street. This is really kind of a follow-on question. One of the things that's striking is the school budget is voted on by the board of directors, but then it goes to a town meeting, and then it goes to a ballot box. And of course, the town budget, the municipal budget, 7 people sitting up here, including 2 of you, vote, and that's it. Same thing applies to bonds. So I guess my question is, leaving aside the practicalities of a charter amendment, do you think it would be good for the budget to go to a town meeting or to a vote for the municipality? And kind of a related question to how you structure representative democracy, are you happy with the amount of opportunities for public comment at town council meetings?
I think Sam's first on this one.
The last part again, Brian?
Yeah, we didn't get that at all.
Are you the last part was, are you happy with the amount of opportunities for public comment at town council meetings?
Sam?
Sure. No, great question. I think there needs to be more. I wish there would be more. I'm always disappointed at how few people are showing up to the budget talks. There are plenty. It's not something that's done lightly with the budget, nor is the school budget, I'm sure. So I think we need to have more opportunity for them to come in. I think, I think a public vote on that would be quite a tricky thing, because not everyone voting would be privy to the entire, budget process. I also have a similar question. How many people typically show up at the school meeting to vote on that budget? I don't think that's very indicative of the whole town either. I think it's a pretty limited number of people voting on that. So I think there are a lot of variables here. I would have to be convinced of opening that up to a public vote, I think. But I think we do need to have more participation by the community in the budget. We send out the tax bills, the whole tax bill, and so we get a lot of attention that way too. So,
Tom?
Yeah, I really agree with what Sam had to say. We have over 9,000 registered voters in Orono. We have a very small percentage of people that attend the budget approval meeting that you hold before the referendum, and a very small percentage of people that attend the referendum. So I'm not sure that process is one that that I would support moving forward on. But I do think that looking for ways to have a greater amount of participation in the budget development process is something that we should all support.
Dan?
I'm still, would you please come up? And again, before you mentioned something about the ballot box and concise what you said.
Just asking, should the municipal budget be decided just with the 7 town councilors, or should it go to a public vote or to a town meeting, like municipal budgets in other towns in the state do, and like the school budget does? And then also the public comment opportunities at town council meetings.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. I love this thing. A forensic fiscal report put out to the people of the town of Orono, line item vote, every capital expense. I really love competitive bidding. I think it's a great way to minimize our impact. There is, to my understanding, of course it limited perhaps, because I haven't seen such a forensic fiscal report, there's no real effort to rein it in, to limit it. When a person on Social Security has their home go up to $2,500, $3,000 in taxes, oh my God, how sinful is that? And they got a budget with food, heat, sinful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that there's plenty of opportunity to come to budget meetings and to be here. I talk to people in town, and sometimes I think that that we need to take the meetings to the people instead of having the people come to the meetings. Just meet in different locations or something, just to get some kind of input, because they just, for some reason, they just don't want to be, the empty chairs in the audience. I think that the people in Orono should have a say in the budget, however that plays out. I say yes.
I think we should be striving to open as many things to a public vote as possible. If education is the issue, then we should be striving to make sure the people of Orono are educated on these issues then, and have more systems in place that they are informed on the processes that go into determining the budget. I think we need more democracy, not less, pretty much in any situation all the time. Because I think if we say we don't trust the people to vote and make decisions that are in their best interests, we are at risk of no longer representing the people. And I also think when we're thinking about why so many of these chairs are empty, it's really difficult for people to get involved in our current economic climate, when people are struggling, and when people are not well informed, and when people are disenfranchised from the process in all sorts of ways, they may not even be aware that any of these talks are going on, let alone have the time to attend them. So I think there just needs to be more outreach and not less voting.
Yeah, Ruben.
So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I advocate really restructuring our democracy on the local level to make it more based on direct participation. And the way we can start doing that, and the way we can start building that participation, is through participatory budgeting. So I believe in Portugal and in Spain, people are working on it. In Chicago, I think it's already in place, a system where, because you can start small. So in Chicago, a small portion of the budget is set aside. People submit proposals. They vote on it, and it's totally in control of this direct democratic system. And that's a way to really begin building more citizen involvement in the political process. And you can start small and expand that. Ultimately, I think the entire budget should be voted on in that, not just voted on, but really set by the people democratically. And as for the school budget, I think students should have an opportunity to participate in the school budget as well.
Okay, well, I think we're a little past our publicized end time, so I'd like to thank all the candidates for stepping forward and offering their time and skills to the town and the community, and to all of you. And I thank all of you for coming in and participating and asking questions.
And thank you to our moderator.
Thank you.
Oh, and I do want to tell you, the camera is going to stay live because we can't turn it off. So think about that while you're sitting up there.
I think we share a lot of the same concerns and values.